Hey guys, tonight we're going way, way back, to a time when being born wasn't just difficult, it was practically a death sentence. Imagine this, you arrive in the world not to sterile white lights and gentle lullabies, but to the damp corner of a dirt-floored cottage, surrounded by shouting women, a steaming cauldron of who knows what, and the overwhelming smell of sheep fat and old socks. Congratulations, you're now a baby in the Middle Ages. And you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's start with your grand entrance into the world. Birth, in the medieval era, is less a joyful event and more a high-stakes gamble played in a dim room with no soap and very little hope. Your mother is probably giving birth at home. There are no hospitals unless you're a noble, and even then, you probably wouldn't want to go near one. Cleanliness is more of a theoretical concept than a practice. Most midwives work with the tools they have, old cloths, herbal concoctions, and hands that have been through a lot. No one's washing up between patients. The midwife might be delivering a calf tomorrow with the same hands she's using today to cut your umbilical cord. And good luck if she decides to sharpen the scissors on her apron. Antiseptic? That's not even a word yet. The birthing chamber is warm, yes, but not in the cozy, hig way. It's stifling, humid from boiled herbs, lit by tallow candles that smoke and sputter. There's a pit dug into the earth to catch whatever comes out of your mom, because birthing is messy, and these people know it. But sanitation? Most floors are covered in straw mixed with manure to soak things up. It works. Kind of. Until you realize that bacteria loves this setup. If you're lucky, your mother survives the ordeal. If not, you've just joined the orphans club, along with maybe a third of your generation. And now it's your turn to face the music. You're slippery, bluish, not breathing, maybe screaming. Midwives have a range of techniques for starting a baby. Slapping? Sure. Holding you upside down and shaking you a little? Also a yes. Blowing into your nose? Absolutely. Rubbing salt or ashes on your skin? You bet. You're not a miracle of biology. You're a weird, half-demonic thing that needs to be wrestled into life. Let's talk about that cord. Cutting the umbilical cord is usually done with whatever's sharp and nearby. A knife, a shard of pottery, maybe even teeth in extreme cases. Tying it off? Some thread will do. Sterile? Never. There's no concept of germs, only spirits. And if you get an infection at that stump, well, you start your life with a fever and a foot in the grave. Once you're cleaned up, a generous term, you might be rubbed down with butter, animal fat, or wine. Not to cleanse you, necessarily, but to toughen your skin and prepare you for the elements. In winter, that element is freezing cold, because insulation is basically a dream, and babies are expected to just deal with it. Next comes the wrapping ritual. You're swaddled so tightly you can't move a muscle. Arms and legs bound straight to prevent deformity. Some parents even believe this prevents the devil from slipping into your joints. It's like being stuffed into a medieval straitjacket, except it's made of crusty linen strips that haven't been washed since your older brother used them 3 years ago. You're then placed somewhere safe. That could mean the floor, a cradle by the hearth, or, if your mom has to go back to work immediately, a shelf, hung basket, or literal wall hook. Some babies were strapped to boards and leaned against the wall like medieval decor. You are, effectively, luggage with a heartbeat. And don't think people are cooing over you, whispering sweet nothings. Babies aren't adored like modern little cherubs. You're viewed more like an uncertain investment. No one's naming you yet. You might not make it through the week. Attachment is dangerous. Even your mom might be holding you like you're a hot potato. Meanwhile, the neighbors are dropping by to check whether you're normal. That could mean checking for birthmarks, seen as signs of curses, counting fingers and toes, or checking your cries for signs of possession. Too quiet? Bad. Too loud? Worse. If you're born with a disability, visible or not, superstitions abound. Some folks might think you're a changeling, a fairy replacement for the real child. You could be left out in the cold overnight, just to test that theory. If the fairies don't take you back, well, nature might. You're about 6 hours old now. Time for your first feeding, maybe. Unless your mother can't nurse, in which case you'll be passed off to a wet nurse, assuming the family can afford one. If not, someone might try feeding you goat milk or bread mashed into wine, both of which are terrible ideas for a newborn. Formula, this is not. And through all of this, you're still wrapped up like a tiny corpse, probably lying in a box stuffed with moth-eaten rags, and praying, well, not you, you don't have thoughts yet, that no rats come too close tonight. Because yes, the rat problem is real. The family cat might help, or it might be asleep in the hearth. Either way, you're kind of on your own. So welcome to life, tiny medieval human. You're less of a bundle of joy and more a bundle of medical crises waiting to happen. If you survive the week, it's considered a small miracle. But don't celebrate yet, we've got plenty more horrors to get through. You're alive. Somehow. A few days old, still swaddled like a sausage, and already a survivor. But now comes your biggest enemy yet, disease. And spoiler alert, it's coming for you, hard and fast. The thing is, no one around you has the faintest idea what a germ is. Not one. Bacteria? Viruses? Microscopic organisms? That's sci-fi nonsense to the medieval brain. If you get sick, and trust me, you will, it's not because someone sneezed on you. It's because of bad smells. Or your parents sinned. Or maybe a witch walked past your window yesterday. Let's be clear, germ theory won't exist for another 600 years. In the meantime, people are making wild guesses. The most popular one? Miasma, basically, bad air. If something stinks, people assume it causes illness. And if you live in a one-room hut with a fire pit in the middle, an open latrine out back, and zero airflow, congratulations, you're living in a biological war zone. Now imagine you're just a few weeks old, and you catch a fever. It's not like anyone's rushing to the pediatric Ian. There isn't one. Instead, your parents are lighting candles to saints, stuffing garlic under your mattress, or maybe praying to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth, to do something, anything, to keep you alive. You might also get a string of blessed beads tied around your wrist, or a holy medal pinned to your swaddle, because what this infection really needs is divine accessorizing. But you're still burning up. So they try the second most common cure, balancing the humors. Yes, medieval medicine's greatest hit. According to this theory, your body is full of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you're sick, it means they're out of whack. The fix? Bleeding you. Yes, even as a baby. Just a little nick here, maybe a leech there, nothing a few ounces of blood loss can't fix, right? And if that doesn't work, it's probably a spiritual problem. Some folks might believe you're possessed. Maybe an evil eye cursed you. Or maybe God is punishing your family and you're just the collateral damage. In that case, it's time for an exorcism. Yes, babies got exorcised. Not with spinning heads and Latin chants, but with rituals like holy water, whispered prayers, and, in some extreme cases, a little symbolic yelling to scare the demons out of you. Very comforting. Meanwhile, your home is a germ banquet. Rats crawl freely. Water comes from the nearest river, which, spoiler alert, is also the town toilet, laundromat, and animal bath. No refrigeration means meat is eaten slightly past the expiration date, if at all. Flies are everywhere, and they treat your face like an airport. But wait, it gets worse. People love incense and dried herbs for purifying the air. Which sounds great until you realize all it's doing is masking the odor while smoke fills your tiny, underdeveloped lungs. Breathing problems? That's just part of being alive. Let's not forget your family's belief in astrology. They might actually consult a local astrologer to figure out why you're crying so much. Maybe Venus is in retrograde. Or Mercury is throwing shade from the 4th house. Either way, nobody's checking your temperature or making sure you're hydrated. They're busy mapping your star chart. And if you're lucky enough to live near a healer, some old woman with a herb pouch and a deep suspicion of toads, prepare for potions. Lots of them. Onion juice, sheep's urine, crushed snails, or powdered bones might be rubbed on your gums for teething. You could be fed poppy tea to help you sleep. Which, by the way, is straight up opioids for infants. Yes, medieval parents drugged their babies to keep them quiet. Not because they were cruel, but because they were desperate, and because no one knew any better. If you survive this phase, it's only because your immune system pulled off a miracle. Statistically, you've already got one foot in the grave. In some towns, up to 50% of babies died before their first birthday. And no one had a clue why. Disease wasn't something you prevented. It was something you endured, or didn't. Let's say you come down with something clearly contagious, like smallpox, measles, or whooping cough. Quarantine? Masking? Not a chance. You'll likely sleep in the same bed as your sick siblings, or worse, your sick goat. There's no concept of sick leave. Your mom still has to work in the fields, your dad is off repairing a roof, and you're lying there, coughing up a lung while a 5-year-old cousin plays with a rusty knife nearby. And God help you if the local priest thinks you're sick because you were conceived on the wrong holy day. That kind of shame can follow your family for generations. Some communities genuinely believed illness could be inherited through sin. Not genetics. Sin. So if you're sickly, people might treat your entire bloodline like it's cursed. Of course, that doesn't mean they won't try to help. But help might mean burning incense near your bed. Or chanting psalms while you're feverish. Or tying a dead mole to your swaddle, because apparently, that drives away evil spirits. There's even a chance someone will recommend putting you in a freshly dug grave, temporarily, we hope, to trick death into thinking you're already gone. Still with us? Miraculously? Then you're beating the odds. But don't get cocky. You're still surrounded by medieval humans with no soap, no science, and a suspicious fondness for goat dung poultices. The diseases will keep coming. So will the terrible ideas. And honestly, if you had the vocabulary for it, you'd be screaming "WHY is everyone like this?" But hang tight. Because next, we're diving into how, and what, you're expected to eat. And spoiler, it's not Gerber purees and organic oat milk. You're still alive. Barely. But now your tiny, shriveled stomach starts growling, and it's not just gas. You need food. Calories. Nourishment. Except, this is the Middle Ages, and no one around you has read a parenting blog. The concept of nutrition doesn't exist. Feeding a baby is less science, more vague hope and desperate improvisation. If your mother is alive and healthy, and that's a big if, she'll probably breastfeed you. It's the default for poor families. Formula isn't even a dream yet. Bottles don't exist. Pacifiers are just bits of cloth dipped in wine or honey, which sounds sweet until you remember that honey sometimes carries botulism, especially deadly for infants. And if your mom is malnourished herself, her milk might be thin, inconsistent, or dry up altogether. So now what? That's where wet nurses come in. If your family has a bit of coin, or works in a noble household, you might be handed off to another woman whose only job is to feed you with her own milk. Sounds straightforward. Except, again, this is the Middle Ages, and things get weird fast. Wet nursing is a full-on industry. Some noble families send their babies off to live with wet nurses in the countryside for months or even years. Why? Because upper-class women aren't expected to breastfeed. It's seen as too exhausting, too animal, and frankly beneath them. Plus, there's a strong belief that breastfeeding interferes with fertility, and noblemen aren't about to wait a full year for their next heir. So off you go, tiny aristocrat, into the arms of a stranger who might be juggling 3 other infants and hasn't washed her tunic since the last plague wave. Meanwhile, peasants don't have the luxury of shipping their babies off. Your mother probably has to get back to harvesting turnips or milking sheep the day after you're born. That means she might breastfeed you standing up, squatting in the fields, or with one eye on the door in case the bailiff shows up. If she can't manage that, you're going to get other food. Let's talk about that. Weaning in the Middle Ages basically means, the baby won't stop crying and I have chores to do, so here's whatever's lying around. That might include bread soaked in ale. No joke. Babies as young as a few weeks old were given pap, a gloopy paste made from bread, water, broth, milk, if available, or even chewed up food spat from an adult's mouth. If that sounds gross, well, it is. But it was also believed to be easier for you to digest. After all, grandmas already pre-chewed it. So thoughtful. Sometimes, people even tried animal milk, usually goat or cow. But remember, there's no pasteurization, no refrigeration, and no measuring cups. You're drinking milk that might have sat in a clay pot for 2 days next to the fire. Yum. Better hope it's not full of bacteria. Spoiler, it is. And here's the kicker. Parents had no idea what infants could or couldn't digest. They didn't know about allergies, lactose intolerance, or choking hazards. They didn't know that honey was a risk, or that alcohol wasn't ideal for developing brains. Some people genuinely believed wine helped babies sleep better, or that feeding a baby meat early would make them strong and aggressive, in a good way. But it's not just what you eat. It's how you eat. Forget high chairs. Forget bibs. You're probably being propped up on someone's knee, a bit of rag tied around your neck, and handed a chunk of soggy crust to gum to death. It's less mealtime and more chaotic culinary roulette. And remember that swaddling? You're still wrapped tighter than a Chipotle burrito, which makes feeding a bit of an acrobatic feat. Your arms don't move. Your legs don't bend. And your ability to spit out something disgusting? Severely compromised. Now, because medieval people do love a good theory, they have strong opinions about what kinds of food affect your personality. Warm foods are thought to be good for passion. Cold ones make you sluggish. Dry food? That's for thinkers. Moist food? That's for singers or lovers or something. It's all humoral theory again, those 4 magical body fluids, and every feeding choice is now also a personality prediction. And guess what? If you're a boy, people might try to feed you more strong foods, meat, ale, eggs, so you grow into a mighty warrior. Girls get more calming stuff, gruel, milk, vegetables, to keep them docile and obedient. Gender roles start early around here. If you get sick from any of this, people probably won't blame the food. They'll think it's a bad omen, a spell, or a punishment. And the solution might involve switching your diet, or switching your caretaker. Maybe someone thinks your wet nurse is cursed, or that your mother is nursing you while angry, which was genuinely believed to poison the milk. So they might take you away and try to find someone more pure to feed you. And just when you start getting the hang of things, maybe holding your own spoon or mouthing a crust, you hit another hurdle, teething. In modern times, we give babies chilled teething rings and lots of cuddles. In medieval times, they give you onion slices, hard roots, or, if you're lucky, amber necklaces believed to draw the pain out. Oh, and if you cry too much during teething? Some people assume it's possession. You might get a prayer whispered into your mouth mid-scream. If you're a peasant baby, your food supply is also wildly unpredictable. Crops fail. You starve. Winter hits early. Say goodbye to anything fresh. You're not the first mouth to feed, you're the last. And if there's no milk and no grain, your parents may genuinely not know what to do. Some babies are fed on nothing but cabbage water for weeks. Some get flat-out alcohol to knock them out. Some don't make it. If you're a noble baby, you have better odds. You might get fed from silver spoons, served boiled chicken, almond milk, sweetened puddings, luxuries of the era. But even that comes with danger, rich food, sugary treats, and spoiled milk from being left out too long in the feasting hall. And if you're unlucky enough to be in a castle during a siege, no one's eating, not even the baby in the velvet bonnet. So no, it's not cute. It's not cozy. Feeding a baby in the Middle Ages is a terrifying mix of guesswork, superstition, and borderline negligence. If you survive your first year with all your teeth and your insides intact, consider yourself a walking miracle. And now that you've had your meal, it's time for bed. Or at least, something resembling sleep. But let's just say your medieval crib setup is not baby approved. You've been fed, sort of. You're still alive, barely. And now, it's time for your very first bath. You might imagine a warm, gentle soak in a little wooden tub, maybe with lavender bubbles and someone singing a lullaby. Think again. This is the Middle Ages, and bath time is more of a medieval ritual than a hygiene practice. And it could just as easily kill you as clean you. First of all, medieval people don't really believe in regular bathing. Sure, some cultures, like the Arabs or the Byzantines, have rich bathing traditions. But in most of medieval Europe, cleanliness is a suspicious luxury. Washing too often is thought to weaken the body. Open your pores too much, and the bad air, remember miasma, might sneak in and give you plague. So unless you're visibly crusty, no one's in a hurry to scrub you down. But newborns are a special case. People think your skin is soft and weak, and therefore must be hardened. Enter the boil and pray method. Here's what that looks like. A big cauldron of water is heated over the fire, then ladled into a wooden or stone tub. If you're lucky, someone waits for it to cool down. If you're not, you get dunked in while it's still hot enough to make your toes curl. Safety checks, thermometers, a little splash test, please. The test is whether or not you scream loud enough to shake the rafters. Sometimes herbs are tossed in, chamomile, rosemary, sage, meant to soothe the baby and ward off evil spirits. But again, no one's measuring doses here. It's more of a witch's stew vibe than a wellness routine. Some babies are bathed in wine, milk, or even beer. Why? Because those things are thought to have medicinal properties. Also, beer is often cleaner than water. You might be rinsed with ale while your mom mumbles a protective charm, hoping it'll make you strong and keep the demons at bay. If your family's extra devout, someone might whisper psalms or recite Latin prayers as they pour water over your head. But let's not forget the tools. There are no soft washcloths or baby-friendly loofahs. You might be rubbed down with rough linen or straw, yes, straw, to toughen your skin. In some regions, it's common to coat babies in animal fat or lard after a bath, especially in winter, to seal in the heat. Congratulations! You're now a basted turkey. And let's be real, the water's probably filthy. It may have been used by others in the family first, because drawing clean water is hard work. Buckets hauled from a stream, rainwater collected in barrels, or well water dragged up by rope. So by the time it gets to you, it's cloudy, lukewarm, and smells vaguely of moss, feet, and despair. Even worse, shared baths are normal. You might be dunked with your siblings, cousins, or the neighbor's toddler. Hygiene wasn't exactly individualized. If someone's got a rash, it's now everyone's rash. And bathing isn't just about cleaning. It's also a spiritual exercise. Some folks believe a newborn bath can wash away original sin, or that the devil clings to your skin after birth and must be scrubbed off, fast. That's why some babies get an extra aggressive rub down. Not because you're dirty, because you're theologically suspicious. Then there's the drying process. Towels are rare and usually coarse. You'll probably be wiped down with whatever's hanging by the hearth, old clothes, discarded linen, maybe fur if your family's fancy. No one's gently patting you dry. It's more like polishing a very angry potato. And once you're dry, back into the swaddle you go. Tight as ever. Still slightly damp. No ventilation. If the temperature outside is below freezing, and inside isn't much better, you might be wrapped in layers of scratchy wool or animal hides. If it's hot, too bad. You're sweating inside your little mummy cocoon, and no one's worried about heat stroke. Oh, and one more thing. People didn't bathe babies often. Maybe once a week. Maybe less. If you're the seventh child, they might forget entirely. Your daily freshen up might just be someone wiping your face with a spit-dampened cloth or flicking the crumbs off your Odyssey equivalent. And if you vomit on yourself, that's character building. Sometimes, instead of a bath, babies are smoked. Not in the barbecue sense, though honestly, it's close. In colder regions, they place you near the hearth to keep warm and let the smoke dry any dampness on your skin. This definitely toughens you up, assuming you don't inhale enough soot to knock out your baby lungs. And remember, all of this happens in a house where livestock might live indoors. Floors are made of compacted dirt, and chamber pots are emptied whenever someone remembers. So the second you're clean, you're already dirty again. The idea of maintaining hygiene is kind of like trying to dry your clothes in a hurricane. Futile. And muddy. To top it off, no one knows about cross-contamination. The same hands used to change your soiled cloth diaper, if you're lucky enough to have one, are probably the same hands bathing you, preparing meals, and swatting flies. If someone in the family has a skin infection, well, the baby bath is now a vector. Congrats, you're a biological sponge. And yet, despite all of this, people really do care. They want to keep their babies alive. They just don't know how. They're working with guesses, gossip, and old wives' tales passed down like holy scripture. It's not neglect, it's medieval trial and error. Emphasis on the error. So if you made it through a bath without being burned, frozen, infected, or spiritually traumatized, that's cause for celebration. But don't get too comfy. Because next, we're talking about what happens when you're left alone. Or at least, parked somewhere while the adults get back to work. And spoiler alert, it's not a crib with a mobile and gentle lullabies, it's a literal wall hook. Okay, freshly bathed, or at least dunked, smoked, and towel polished. You're now a couple of weeks into your medieval baby career. And congratulations! You've earned the right to do absolutely nothing but lay there, stare at the ceiling beams, and pray you don't get dropped. Except you won't just lay there. You're going to be wrapped, tied, and possibly hung. Yep. Welcome to the art of swaddling and abandonment, two very medieval parenting strategies. Let's start with the swaddling. Medieval parents are really into it. We're talking full-body bondage for babies. Arms straight at your sides, legs stuck together like a fish, all tied up with linen strips until you resemble a fabric caterpillar. Why? Because they believe it prevents deformities. Babies are born soft and squishy, like poorly baked bread, and parents think if you're not properly trussed, your limbs will grow in the wrong direction. So they wrap you like a burrito, tight enough to hold in your soul. And not just for nap time. You're swaddled constantly, often for months at a time. Some sources mention babies being kept in the same binding for 8 or 9 months straight. They might rewrap you daily, or not, depending on how busy your parents are and how much of a mess you make. Diapers? Not really a thing. At best, you get a cloth rag tucked under you, which gets changed when it starts to smell like a barn caught fire. So now you're not only wrapped up, you're soaking in it. You'd think this would limit mobility. And you'd be right. There's no tummy time. No crawling. Just lying flat, immobile, like a tiny, vaguely damp scroll. Early movement is discouraged, because moving, in their eyes, means misaligning your joints or inviting demons into your limbs. And we obviously don't want that. Now, what happens when your mother needs to get back to her 16 hours of unpaid, exhausting manual labor? She can't afford to sit around cooing at you all day. She's got crops to harvest, animals to milk, and a fire that needs constant stoking. So where do you go? Answer: somewhere safe. And by safe, we mean not directly on the floor where a pig might step on you. So you might be tied into a wooden cradle, a simple box, no mattress, just straw and an old tunic. It might rock, it might not. If you're lucky, it's next to the hearth for warmth. If you're unlucky, it's too close to the hearth and you're slowly roasting like a festive ham. Or, brace yourself, you might be hung. Not in a cruel way. More like in a practical, no one here has time for childcare kind of way. Some families hang babies from hooks or rafters, swaddled tightly and placed in slings, baskets, or cradle boards. It's like an old-school baby-bjorn, nailed to the ceiling. Why? Keeps you off the ground, out of reach of dogs, goats, and feral toddlers. Also makes it harder for you to roll into the fire or fall into the cesspit. Which happens more often than you'd think. Traveling? You might be strapped to your mother's back with a sash or tied to a packhorse. Baby carriers? Try a knotted rag and a prayer. The road is bumpy, the air is filthy, and you're bouncing along like a sack of flour with eyes. If your family's religious, and most are, they might hang charms from your cradle, like a little pouch of dried herbs, a carved symbol, or a piece of iron to ward off witches. Especially if you're the kind of baby that cries a lot. People fear changelings, fairy imposters swapped for real babies, so a loud, restless infant might be seen as suspicious. Hanging iron over your head is less decoration, more please don't let my baby be secretly evil. And then there's noise. You might think your medieval home is quiet and peaceful. Wrong. It's chaos. The fire crackles non-stop. The animals shuffle and bleat. Older siblings scream. Neighbors yell through open windows. Your father is sharpening a scythe next to the bed. There's zero chance of nap time in total silence. Sleep training? That's not a thing. If you're tired, you'll pass out eventually. If not, well, hope you like staring into the middle distance while someone churns butter 4 feet away. Also, rats. They're everywhere. If your cradle's low to the ground, or worse, made of straw, you might wake up nose to nose with a rat the size of a dachshund. Parents sometimes hang cradles for this reason too. It's the medieval version of pest control. If your mother has to leave the house, she might leave you swaddled in the cradle and tell an older sibling to watch the baby. That sibling is probably 6, maybe 5. Childcare is a group effort, and no one has any actual training. If that sibling gets distracted, and let's be honest, they will, you're at the mercy of fate. And the outdoors? Oh, you're going there too. Swaddled, hung in a tree, yes, really, or strapped to your mother's waist as she hoes a field. You're exposed to the elements, rain, wind, sun, and the occasional goose. There's no SPF, no bug spray, and no maybe we should go back inside. You're part of the medieval background now, like moss on a rock. Some parents prop their babies upright using stones, sticks, or baskets so they can keep an eye on you while they work. Imagine being a 4-month-old sitting bolt upright in a cabbage patch, watching your mom shovel manure. That's your entertainment. And crying? Crying isn't an emergency. It's background noise. People assume babies cry for mysterious, possibly supernatural reasons. If you're too loud, someone might sprinkle holy water on you, rub garlic on your chest, or hang a cross around your neck. Medical attention? No, no, no. You just need a blessing. So yes, you're swaddled, sometimes hung, occasionally forgotten, and always very, very flammable. But hey, if you don't roll into the fire or get trampled by a pig, you might just survive to the crawling stage. And that's a whole new problem. So, you've made it past the tied up like a sausage stage. You're still swaddled, but now you're wriggling with intent. And soon, you're going to do something truly dangerous. You're going to move. Yes, it's crawling time. The milestone that, in modern households, earns applause and 1,000 phone videos. But in a medieval home, crawling is like giving a toddler a chainsaw and setting them loose in a fireworks factory. Because the medieval home is not baby-proofed. It is anti-baby. Let's take a little tour, shall we? First, the floors. There's no carpet. No smooth hardwood. No cute foam tiles with puzzle piece letters. You're crawling on packed earth, cold, uneven, often damp, and definitely not clean. Most floors are covered in straw or rushes, which sounds rustic and cozy until you realize it's basically a doormat made of filth. It soaks up everything, spilled food, chamber pot accidents, pig hooves, and gets replaced maybe once a season. Maybe. So every inch you crawl is a microbial jungle of feces, rotting food, and whatever the dog dragged in last week. And oh yes, the dog. Because the medieval home is shared with everyone. Dogs, cats, chickens, goats, and on especially cursed days, the neighbor's goose. There are no rooms, no baby gates, no closed doors. If it walks, flaps, or slithers, it probably lives under your crib. And guess what? The rats are still here too. They're in the walls, in the rushes, and sometimes on you. The hearth. Not just a fire hazard, it is the fire hazard. Every home, even the tiniest peasant hut, has an open fire in the center. There's no grate, no barrier, just a roaring pit of flame surrounded by sharp iron tools and bubbling cauldrons of hot liquid. So as soon as you gain enough strength to roll or scoot your way across the room, congratulations, you've turned into a tiny missile aimed directly at third-degree burns. Let's say you're crawling and you come across something interesting, a shard of pottery, a chicken bone, a dead beetle, an actual piece of dung. You're a baby, so of course, you put it in your mouth. And now the race begins. Will your immune system develop fast enough to fight off whatever was living on that thing? Or will you spiral into a medieval stomach infection and spend your final days curled up like a sad turnip? And even if you don't eat something cursed, you're probably still breathing in smoke. The hearth is always burning, always smoking, and homes aren't ventilated. Some don't even have chimneys. The smoke rises to the thatch roof, lingers there, and slowly fills the space like a fog machine set to choke. You're basically hotboxing yourself in medieval carbon monoxide. Oh, and about that roof? It's made of straw or thatch, great for insulation, terrible for security. Birds nest in it. Bugs breed in it. Bits of it fall down onto your sleeping face. It's like living under a constantly crumbling salad. Now let's talk about furniture, or the lack of it. There are no couches. No soft corners. You might crawl straight into a sharp wooden bench or the iron legs of the cauldron tripod. Or worse, a bucket full of waste. That's right. Many homes keep a chamber pot inside, especially in winter. It's rarely covered. If you're lucky, it's tucked in a corner. If not, it's just sitting there, open to the world. Ready for baby exploration. And don't even get me started on tools. Medieval families hang their knives on the wall. Or store scythes under the bed. There's often an axe near the door. Everything is sharp, heavy, rusted, and within reach. Because again, no one invented the phrase child safety yet. Let's say you're a noble baby. Surely, you're safer? Yes and no. Rich homes have better floors, sometimes tiled, sometimes wooden, but they also have candles everywhere, tall staircases with no railings, and massive dogs the size of horses. Oh, and servants bustling constantly with trays of hot soup and spiked wine. It's like living in Downton Abbey, but with way more open flames and slightly less supervision. And while we're here, let's talk about windows. In peasant huts, they're just holes in the wall, maybe with a cloth, maybe not. In richer homes, they might be covered with thin animal bladder or slivers of horn to let in light. Glass exists, but it's expensive and rare. Either way, a curious baby might crawl right up to one and fall straight out, because no one's putting a screen or bar there. If you're particularly ambitious, you might try to stand. And now we've entered a whole new phase of danger. Babies pulling themselves up on furniture that's wobbly, sharp, or made from raw timber. You fall? You hit the stone floor. Head trauma? Hope your humors balance out. There's no ER. Just maybe a neighbor who's good with herbs. And now we get to discipline. If you cry too much or try to crawl where you're not supposed to, some parents will simply tie you to something. Literally. A bedpost, a chair leg, a big rock. You're not a baby, you're an errant balloon. Some are leashed like pets with little cords, or wrapped even tighter to prevent movement. It's not abuse, per se. It's just how people survive childcare in a world with no time and no resources. If you're a little older, say, 1 or 2, you might be helping with chores. Carrying sticks. Fetching eggs. Herding ducks. All great fun until you walk into a wasp's nest or a wolf wanders too close. Because yes, wolves are real danger. Especially in winter, when they roam into towns looking for food. Babies. Easy snacks. So really, learning to crawl isn't some Instagrammable milestone here. It's your first dangerous act. Your first taste of mobility in a world that is absolutely not designed for your survival. But you're determined. You're wiggling. You're on the move. And soon, very soon, you'll start eating actual food. Or whatever passes for food in the Middle Ages. Hope you like beer-soaked bread and chewed-up meat from Grandma's mouth. You've crawled across the manure-soaked floor, dodged the fire pit, gnawed a rat tail, probably, and now you're standing upright. Congratulations! You're officially a toddler, small, mobile, and wildly unqualified for life. But now comes the next big milestone, real food. You'd think this is where things get better. Less spit up, fewer swaddle blowouts. But no. This is where things get weird. Because medieval people do not believe in a gentle transition to solids. There are no rice cereal starter kits. No carefully labeled jars of pured carrots. Your weaning process is a sudden plunge off a culinary cliff, and trust me, the landing is hard. Let's begin with what's not available. There are no forks. No spoons for toddlers. No sippy cups. No hygiene. Food is served hot, coarse, and basically adult-sized. You are now expected to chew like a grown-up, with baby teeth, on bread harder than your skull. And what's in the menu rotation? Oh boy! If you're lucky, you start with pottage, a thick mush of grain and vegetable boiled into something resembling sad oatmeal. It's the closest thing to baby food in your medieval diet. It might include onions, garlic, leeks, old cabbage, and if the season's kind, a rogue carrot. If your parents are feeling fancy, maybe a bit of salted pork. If they're desperate, rats, weevils, and foraged mushrooms. Don't get excited. No one here knows which mushrooms are safe. And pottage isn't just for toddlers. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the entire family. You're not being served a special plate, you're being handed whatever's in the shared pot. If someone sneezed in it earlier, that's seasoning. Sometimes, your parents will pre-chew food for you. Yep, just straight up chew it in their mouth and then pass it to you. It's called pre-mastication, and in a world without blenders or baby teeth, it's actually kind of efficient. Gross, yes, but efficient. A lovingly chewed chunk of bread or meat straight from mom's mouth to yours. Warm and partially digested. And liquids? Forget milk. Cow milk is mostly reserved for making cheese. Goat milk, if available, might be offered. But again, no one's checking the freshness. Your main drink is either small beer or diluted wine. Yes, alcohol. For babies. Why? Because water is dangerous. Most of it is drawn from wells, ditches, or rivers where livestock bathe and people dump waste. So to make it safe, they boil it with barley or mix it with wine. The result? A drink with just enough alcohol to keep bacteria down, but not enough to get everyone drunk. And since you're now part of the family meal rotation, you drink it too. Sippy cup. Meet medieval Merlot. Now let's talk about table manners. Or rather, the lack of them. No one expects toddlers to sit quietly or eat neatly. You're either perched on someone's lap or propped on a bench between two adults trying to stop you from grabbing a hot spoon. There are no high chairs. No child-safe utensils. Just a fire, a knife, and whatever finger food gets dropped on the ground. And yet, if you're noble, you might get your own little wooden trencher, a plate made from stale bread, or even your own spoon. You might be fed by a nurse or servant while your parents dine in elaborate silence across the hall. In theory, that sounds cushier. In reality, it just means your spit-out turnip mash gets wiped with silk instead of linen. Oh, and nobles have their own food disasters. Rich toddlers are more likely to choke on bones hidden in meat, or overdose on sugar-coated delicacies when sweets arrive from the Middle East. A toddler with a sweet tooth and zero self-control? Let's just say dental care wasn't exactly top tier. In poor households, mealtime might double as distraction. You're handed something to gnaw on so your mother can keep weaving, or churning, or kneading dough without you crawling into a fire. So you might chew on crusts, dried roots, or, horrifyingly common, animal bones. Not meat-covered bones. Just bones. It's considered soothing for teething. And if you're teething hard, you might get clove rubbed on your gums. Or poppy syrup. Yep, we're back to opioids. In some places, herbal remedies included actual opiates to calm fussy babies. A well-fed, drugged-up toddler was a quiet toddler. Side effects. Shush. Choking is a constant risk. So is poisoning. Not deliberate, but through moldy food, unsafe berries, or lead-glazed pottery. Yes, lead. Delicious, brain-melting lead. Toddlers grab, chew, and swallow with reckless abandon, and no one's hovering to Google, is this safe? The only guidebook is your grandmother's vague memory of what didn't kill her previous kids. Then there's fasting. Religious life means a lot of fasting days, especially in devout households. Lent, Advent, Wednesdays, Fridays, meat is off limits. But what about toddlers? Surely they're exempt? Maybe. Some parents keep feeding their kids meat under the table. Others make them fast too, just in case. Imagine being 2 years old and eating nothing but pea mush and dried eel for 40 days straight. Hunger is a constant. If your family's poor, The pantry might be a wooden box with 5 turnips and a prayer. Winters are brutal. Harvests fail. Food spoils. You're not a priority, you're an investment. If there's not enough to go around, you might be the one going without. And famine? That's a generational trauma. Entire regions experience years when crops fail, animals die, and people eat bark, grass, and worse. Infants and toddlers often die first. You can't store body fat, can't fight off infection, can't speak up for yourself. Your survival depends on luck, weather, and whether your older brother shares his crust with you. So eating as a toddler in the Middle Ages isn't just gross. It's deadly. You're in a world where food can poison you, starve you, infect you, or flat out ignore you. And yet, you eat. You gum your way through boiled cabbage. You sip wine water from a wooden bowl. You survive another day. But while you're chewing your way through a beet that's older than you are, something else is coming. It's time to meet the other tiny humans in your life. And trust me, they're not exactly toddler-friendly. So you've survived the medieval menu, barely. You've slurped pottage, chewed on bones, drunk fermented barley water, and miraculously not choked to death on a pebble hidden in your turnip. Well done, champ. But now it's time to meet your biggest challenge yet. Other children. That's right. You, little medieval toddler, are about to be thrown into the absolute chaos of communal child-rearing. Because childhood in the Middle Ages isn't private, cozy, or carefully scheduled. It's loud, filthy, unsupervised, and borderline gladiatorial. Let's set the scene. There are no daycares, no Montessori playgroups, no calm living rooms with rainbow stacking cups and lullaby playlists. In the average medieval household, especially if you're a peasant, kids are everywhere. Dozens of them. Running in and out of houses, farms, and fields like unruly livestock with slightly better balance. And supervision? Hilarious. Adults are busy. They're working, praying, carrying water, or desperately trying to keep the fire going during a snowstorm. The older kids watch the younger ones, and by watch, we mean let them follow us around until someone starts bleeding. If you're the youngest, congratulations, you are the chew toy, the living doll, the one who gets picked up, spun around, and maybe dropped in a trough because someone wanted to see if you'd float. The medieval version of sibling bonding is a cross between hazing and roughhousing, with 0 helmets and lots of livestock. There are no age-appropriate toys. No plushes. No bouncers. Your playthings are tools, dull knives, broken pots, sticks, dirt, and anything you can stuff in your mouth before someone swats it away. In rich households, you might get carved figurines, tiny wooden animals, or cloth dolls filled with grain. Cute, right? Until you realize they're often passed down and held together with lice and hope. And let's not forget games. Toddlers in medieval villages play what older kids play, because there's no separate baby group. That means tag, wrestling, throwing things at chickens, and running through the woods completely unsupervised. If you can toddle, you can chase. If you fall, you eat gravel. If you cry, someone calls you a baby, which you literally are, and life goes on. Older kids might include you, but it's not always kind. They might hand you a chicken feather and tell you it's a magic wand, then run off laughing. They might feed you something spicy just to watch your face crumple. They might convince you to help with chores by handing you a bucket 3 times your size and pointing you toward a goat. You will probably be knocked over by that goat. Twice. Let's talk illness. One of the most dangerous things about being a toddler in this social soup of children is exposure. No one understands germ theory. No one's washing their hands after blowing their nose into their sleeve. Illness spreads like wildfire. Coughs, measles, smallpox, parasites, you name it, someone in your playgroup, aka the yard, has it. And because you're so young, your body doesn't stand a chance. Medieval kids died often, and they died fast. A runny nose could become a death sentence. A rash might be smallpox. A cough could be the plague. But you're still out there, crawling through communal dirt piles and sharing a chewed stick with 5 other snot-covered toddlers. Now, if you're a noble child, things look a bit different, but only on the surface. Upper-class kids are usually raised away from their parents. Noble mothers often hand their babies over to wet nurses, and toddlers are passed along to servants, nurses, or governesses. That means you grow up surrounded by other noble toddlers, and your social circle is a bit more exclusive, but no less dangerous. Your nursemaid might be responsible for 3 or 4 kids, maybe more. She's juggling tantrums, spilled porridge, and trying to stop little Edmund from eating his wax seal again. You're dressed in miniature versions of adult clothes, complete with layers, buttons, and bonnets that itch like mad. You might even be trained in proper courtly behavior, like sitting still or practicing your tiny bow. Sounds cute. It's not. Toddlers don't do etiquette. So while you're being told not to stick your fingers in the gravy bowl, you're also peeing directly into a velvet chair. You may also be sent away from your home to live in someone else's household by the time you're around 7, but the training starts earlier. Your interactions are less about fun and more about learning your place in the hierarchy. You're praised for being quiet, obedient, and eerily adult-like. Not great if you're a shrieky mess of a toddler, which, statistically, you probably are. But whether you're rich or poor, there is one unifying toddler experience: violence. Small kids hit each other. They fall. They get hit. Sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes it's not. And no one's intervening unless someone's bleeding enough to stain the floor. Skinned knees, black eyes, bite marks, normal. If you're lucky, your mom rubs a leaf on it. If you're not, someone just shrugs and says, "He'll grow out of it." And speaking of discipline, spankings, slaps, and shoutings are on the table. People believe in beating the devil out of kids who misbehave. Toddlers aren't immune. You drop the bowl of soup, that might earn you a sharp tap. You bite your brother, someone might threaten to rub garlic on your tongue. It's a harsh world, and the other children are not your gentle peers. They're tiny competitors for food, attention, and space. And you're just the smallest target in the brawl. But somehow, if you can survive toddlerhood, dodging illness, goat kicks, and getting slapped with a turnip by your cousin, you reach a new phase. You're not just surviving now. You're growing up. And that means one thing: your parents start expecting you to work. You're barely out of toddlerhood. You still stumble when you walk, can't tie your own clothes, and your idea of fun is throwing mud at a chicken. But guess what? It's time to get a job. Because in the Middle Ages, childhood doesn't come with a grace period. You don't get to float through the years with finger paint and fairy tales. The second you can walk and follow a 2-step command, you're fair game for labor. Welcome to the tiny workforce, kid. Hope you like splinters. Let's start with the peasants, because that's the vast majority of the population. If your family lives in a village, on a manor, or in a shack surrounded by goats, you're being trained as a little worker from the moment you stop eating dirt. You're not a child. You're an extra pair of hands. If you're around 4 or 5, your first job is usually watching things. Animals. Mostly. Chickens. Geese. Pigs. You might be sent into the fields to guard the family cow or shoo away birds from the grain. Sounds cute until you realize geese are demonic sky serpents and pigs will literally eat anything, including you. You'll carry water in little buckets, fetch firewood, collect eggs, and pick herbs. You'll sweep floors, help wash clothes, or sit at your mother's side plucking feathers from a chicken carcass. And you're expected to do it without complaining, crying, or stopping to chew on your sleeve. Slacking off gets you scolded, or smacked, or worse, ignored, which in a medieval household means you'll miss dinner. Some jobs are bizarrely dangerous for such small humans. You might be told to stir a boiling pot while your mother bakes bread, or to chase a goat away from the cabbage patch using a stick longer than your body. You could be told to carry a candle through a pitch-black hallway filled with trip hazards and firewood. There is no OSHA. If you catch your sleeve on fire, someone might just wrap you in a blanket and keep cooking. Now let's talk apprenticeships. If you're a bit older, maybe 6, maybe 7, you might already be apprenticed to a craftsman. Bakers, blacksmiths, weavers, coopers, cobblers. You're not paid. You might not even live at home. You're there to learn, which mostly means sweeping, fetching, and getting shouted at for hours while inhaling soot. Some of these kids never return to their birth families. They're raised by masters and mistresses who may or may not care about their well-being. If you break something, punishment. If you succeed, more work. If you cry, stop being soft. You're a worker now. In noble households, things are slightly more refined, but no less demanding. If you're a high-born child, your work starts with learning court etiquette. You're trained in manners, posture, music, language, and how to sit still for hours without picking your nose. You're watched constantly, judged relentlessly, and expected to behave like a miniature adult. Boys learn to read, write, and manage estates, if they're lucky. They're also expected to learn hunting, falconry, and maybe swordplay. Girls learn embroidery, singing, prayer, and how to manage a household full of servants they'll someday command. It's less physically dangerous than chasing pigs through a swamp, but it's still intense, and the pressure is soul-crushing. And let's not forget, noble kids are often sent away to other noble households as part of their education. It's a kind of cultural babysitting. You go live with a family who owes yours a favor, and they teach you how to act noble while you polish armor, carry trays, and pray no one mistakes your clumsiness for treason. Even religious training is work. If your family sends you to a monastery or nunnery, your life becomes a cycle of chores, Latin chants, candle snuffing, and strict silence. It's quiet, yes, but also rigid, punishing, and full of expectations you barely understand. You're not there to relax, you're there to be shaped into a future monk, nun, or scholarly servant. No matter your class, your worth is measured by what you do. If you're sick, you're a burden. If you're lazy, you're sinful. Childhood is seen as a necessary evil that must be overcome quickly. There's no praise for imagination. Daydreaming is suspicious. Playing is allowed, but only when work is done. And it's never done. And the thing is, you know this. From a young age, you understand that your role is to help the family survive. That means growing up fast, staying quiet, and doing what you're told. If you don't, consequences. Verbal, physical, maybe spiritual. People believed that discipline shaped your soul, and that an idle child was a path to Satan. Even play starts to feel like labor. You mimic adult tasks. You play market by trading rocks. You pretend to churn butter with a stick. It's not escapism, it's rehearsal. And here's the kicker, you're not even guaranteed to grow up. You're working this hard at 6 or 7, knowing full well that half the kids you play with might not live to see 13. That every winter could be your last. That one bad fever, one infected wound, one poorly cooked rabbit could end it all. But you keep going. You work. You learn. You grow. Because if you live long enough to reach puberty, everything changes again. Now, you're not just a working child. You're a potential adult. And that means it's time to talk about marriage. And sex. And how, in the Middle Ages, those things start way earlier than you think. So here you are, still a child by modern standards, but in the Middle Ages, you've officially been bumped up a rank. You're now marriage material. Yes. You. Covered in dirt, missing several teeth, just recently graduated from goat chasing duty. In today's world, you wouldn't even be allowed to ride a bike without a helmet. But in medieval society, you're already being evaluated as a future spouse, a dowry prospect, or a walking economic asset with a pulse. Let's break it down. In most medieval communities, especially rural ones, the age at which you're considered marriageable is horrifying by today's standards. For girls, it could be as early as 12. For boys, more like 14. The church technically prefers 14 and 16, but let's be real, no one's checking birth certificates. If you look old enough to carry a sack of barley, you look old enough to Wednesday. And marriage isn't about love, or feelings, or whether your crush at the festival made eye contact during the maypole dance. It's about land, survival, and keeping your family from starving to death next winter. Marriages are alliances, economic ones. Whether you're a noble with an estate or a pig farmer with a single goat, your child's marriage is a strategic move. Let's say you're a girl. Around 10 or 11, you start getting prepared. You're taught how to manage a household, spin wool, preserve food, and raise children, because you're expected to do all of that within the next few years. You might be promised to someone already, maybe the boy from the next village, or the widower who owns 2 cows and needs a new wife before planting season. That widower, he might be 40, maybe 50, and you're 13. No, this wasn't the norm everywhere, but it wasn't rare either. Especially if your family needed money or status, and he had both. In noble circles, it's even more dramatic. Girls as young as 12 were sometimes married off to noblemen in their 30s or 40s to forge alliances. Sometimes the marriage wasn't consummated until the girl was a bit older. Sometimes it was. Let that sink in. Now, if you're a boy, you don't get a much better deal. Sure, you might get to wait a few years longer, but by your mid-teens, you're expected to start contributing to the lineage. If you're a peasant, your parents might help you build a cottage on a spare patch of land, if they like you. If you're poor, you might marry into another poor family and share a one-room home with the in-laws. Romantic. And if you're a noble boy, your life is basically a chessboard. You might be sent to live in a lord's household as a page, then a squire, and then, if you survive enough tournaments without losing an eye, you'll be knighted and expected to marry a lady who comes with land, a title, or at least a really nice goat. But again, not about love. Feelings are seen as dangerous. A good match is one that makes sense. A bad match is one that makes you poor, childless, or dead. Parents oversee everything. Arranged marriages are the norm. Some are betrothed before they even hit puberty. Congratulations on being born. You're now promised to Robert the Fish Boy. What if you don't marry? Depends. If you're a woman, you either enter a convent or live with your family forever, slowly sliding into spinster status by your early 20s. In some cases, unmarried women are viewed with suspicion. What's wrong with her? Is she cursed? Is she reading books? If you're a man who doesn't marry, you're either too poor to support a wife, in which case society ignores you, or you're a priest. Which, in theory, means celibacy. In practice, let's just say not everyone followed the rulebook. And speaking of celibacy, let's talk sex education, medieval style. Spoiler, there isn't any. There's no pamphlet, no talk behind closed doors, no safe sex lesson with bananas and uncomfortable giggles. What you learn from barnyard animals, older siblings, or whispered gossip behind the bakehouse. Girls especially are kept in the dark. Many brides go into marriage with zero idea of what's about to happen. Some think they're going to die. And honestly, in the case of first childbirth at age 13 or 14, that's not an unreasonable fear. Contraception exists in the vaguest sense, herbs, amulets, a few questionable old wives' methods, but it's inconsistent, frowned upon, and sometimes illegal under church law. So once you're married, babies usually follow. Rapidly. Your first child might be born before you're 15. By your 20s, you could be on your 3rd or 4th, if you live that long. This is how generations continue. Children having children, households built on teenage labor, marriages sealed before wisdom teeth have even emerged. It's not scandalous. It's expected. And of course, with early marriage and childbirth comes early death. Many young mothers die in labor. Many infants don't survive past the first few months. If you're 15 and have already buried 2 babies, that's not unusual, it's heartbreakingly normal. So no, you wouldn't survive this chapter of medieval life either. You'd be married young, likely without understanding what that even means, and thrust into a life of work, pregnancy, and domestic struggle before you've even figured out your favorite food. If you're lucky, you and your teenage spouse learn to get along. If not, you're stuck. Divorce isn't an option unless you're wealthy, influential, or the Pope owes you a favor. You grin and bear it. Or just bear it. Forever. And if this sounds bleak, don't worry. It gets worse. Because whether you're married, single, noble, peasant, or in a convent, there's one thing you can't escape. The medieval medical system. And if you thought childbirth was rough, just wait until you catch your first cold. Let's say you've made it this far. You've grown up just enough to start your own medieval life. You're married, maybe, or apprenticed, or working the fields. You're eating suspicious food, sleeping in a room full of rats, and somehow still vertical. You've even survived your first few illnesses. A miracle. But don't get cocky, because now we enter the real gauntlet, medieval medicine. Got a cough, a fever, a rash, a strange twitching in your left eye every time you see a goat. Buckle up. Because the people in charge of keeping you alive believe that your body is a collection of boiling fluids, moon-driven forces, and mystical farts. And they're about to go to town on you with leeches and logic that makes zero sense. Let's begin with the basics. The prevailing medical theory of the time is humorism. That's right, your body is filled with four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If they're out of balance, you get sick. If they're really out of balance, you die. Treatment: balance the humors. How? Well, too much blood, bleed you. Too much phlegm, induce vomiting. Too much bile, try laxatives. Too many complaints, you're possessed. So if you show up at the local healer with a fever, you're probably getting drained like a wine cask. A nice slice to the forearm, maybe some leeches on the back of your neck. Feel faint afterward? That's your soul adjusting. Feel worse? Your humors are still angry. Try again tomorrow. Now, who's doing the doctoring? If you're rich, you might have access to an actual physician. He's trained, sort of, at a university, speaks Latin, and owns some books. Problem is, those books were written centuries ago and are mostly wrong. But he'll check your urine, by color, smell, and sometimes taste, wave a candle near your foot, and declare your liver melancholy. If you're poor, like most people, you're seeing a barber surgeon. Yes, the guy who trims your beard also does amputations. He'll pull teeth, lance boils, set bones, and cut out whatever looks infected. Anesthesia? Not a thing. Just bite down on a stick and try not to scream too loud. And then there's the wise woman, the unofficial neighborhood healer. She's not university trained, but she knows her herbs, her poultices, and her superstitions. Sometimes she saves lives. Sometimes she rubs a dead mouse on your chest and hopes for the best. It's a 50-50th gamble. What do treatments look like? Let's say you've got the flu. First, your hair might be shaved off, obviously, because your heat is escaping through your scalp and confusing your humors. Then you're placed in a hot room to sweat it out, covered in mustard plasters and goose grease. Someone might wave a candle over your belly while whispering Latin. If that doesn't work, it's time for purgatives, herbs that make you puke, poop, or both. You could also be cupped. That's when someone heats a glass or horn and sticks it to your skin to create suction. This leaves giant purple bruises and absolutely no benefit. But hey, the bruises look serious, and that means it must be working, right? How about more severe cases? Say you've got a deep infection from stepping on a rusty nail. Modern solution: antibiotics. Medieval solution: cauterization. They'll heat an iron rod until it glows red and press it into the wound. No numbing. No antiseptic. Just screaming. Then they'll wrap it in a linen soaked in vinegar and hope you don't die of gangrene. Or maybe you're having seizures. In that case, you're probably possessed. Treatment: holy water. Prayers. Maybe an exorcism. If you're lucky, a priest waves incense over you. If you're unlucky, they drill a hole in your skull to let the demons out. That procedure, called trepanation, is somehow real. And sometimes, it actually worked. But also sometimes, you die of infection. Or just from having a hole in your head. Let's not forget the bubonic plague. You might have heard of it. If you're a kid during one of the outbreaks, which is extremely possible, your odds of surviving are slim. The recommended treatments range from sitting in a room full of crushed emeralds to literally covering yourself in dead pigeon paste. Some doctors tell you to avoid bathing. Others say bathe in urine. Or rose water. Or both. There's also flagellation, public self-whipping to prove to God how sorry you are for existing, I guess. Plague hits fast. Boils rise under your arms and on your neck. You shiver. You sweat. You smell like death. And most times, that's it. You're gone within days. Entire families vanish overnight. Your baby sibling? Gone. Your best friend? Gone. Your neighbor? Being buried in a mass grave with a dozen others. Even common illnesses can be fatal. Strep throat? No antibiotics, just hot compresses and prayer. Ear infection? No drops, just an onion stuffed in your ear. Toothache? You better hope the barber's sober, because he's yanking that molar out with tongs that haven't been cleaned since last harvest. There is some good in medieval medicine. Herbal remedies do occasionally help. Willow bark eases pain. Honey can clean wounds. Some healers instinctively understand cleanliness. But the problem is inconsistency. There's no standard care. No dosages. No regulation. Just trial, error, and hope. Pregnancy and childbirth? Absolutely terrifying. Women are expected to give birth at home, often on a wooden bench with a hole in the middle. If anything goes wrong, breach, hemorrhage, fever, there's nothing anyone can do. Babies die. Mothers die. Or both. You could live your whole life in constant low-level illness. Sores, aches, worms, rashes. People smelled bad not because they didn't want to bathe, but because water could be dangerous, and bathing too often was thought to weaken the body. Soap was rare. Toothbrushes non-existent. Toothpaste? Burnt rosemary ash, if you're lucky. So, remember that runny nose you used to get in preschool? In the Middle Ages, that might spiral into sinus infection, fever, sepsis, and death. That stomach bug from last month? Fatal dehydration. That time you scraped your knee. If it festers and spreads, you're toast. And through it all, you're expected to keep working, keep praying, and keep contributing to your household. Because if you don't, you're not worth the food it takes to keep you alive. Coming up next, what happens if you survive all this, grow into your teenage years, and start dreaming about becoming something, anything, more? Well, hold on to that dream. Because in the Middle Ages, your future options are extremely limited. Congratulations! You've cheated death through infancy, survived goat-chasing childhood, powered through teenage work life, possibly been married off to someone 3 times your age, and dodged at least one catastrophic illness. You're still standing. Still breathing. And now, you want more. Maybe you're dreaming of a future, a profession, a role, something meaningful beyond just survival. Maybe you've seen a traveling merchant and thought, I want to be that. Maybe you've heard a story from a wandering bard and thought, could I do something bigger than slopping pigs and boiling cabbage for the rest of my life? Well, let's talk about your options. Because in the Middle Ages, social mobility is basically a unicorn. It technically exists, but good luck ever actually seeing it. Let's start with the biggest factor, your birth. If you were born a peasant, odds are, you stay a peasant. You're tethered to the land, bound by duty, debt, and whatever local lord controls your village. Want to become a knight? Too bad. Want to travel, study, invent something? Forget it. Your dreams are irrelevant. What matters is that the wheat gets harvested and the pigs don't escape again. If you were born noble, your path is still limited, just in fancier clothing. Your entire life has likely been mapped out from infancy. You'll either manage land, serve in the military, marry someone strategic, or join the clergy. That's it. No auditions for the traveling theatre company. No gap year to find yourself. Just duty. Rank. Appearances. But okay, let's say you really want out. You want to move up in the world. What's even possible? You could become a monk or nun. For many, this is the only real route to education. Monasteries and convents are the closest thing to universities for non-nobles. You'll learn to read, write, and maybe even get access to books, which are hand-copied, absurdly expensive, and chained to the wall. Sounds peaceful, right? Sure, if you enjoy a lifetime of rigid routine, cold stone cells, bad singing, and 4 a.m. prayer calls. Also, celibacy. Forever. No late night sneaking out, no Tinder. Just parchment. potatoes, and penance. Want to become a scholar or physician? Better be male, rich, and fluent in Latin by the age of 12. Universities exist by the late Middle Ages, but they're elite, insular, and mostly limited to clergy. If you're a peasant with dreams of discovery, maybe you read about astrology or alchemy, you're more likely to be called a heretic than a student. Another option, the military. Not quite the noble knighthood dream, but there are mercenary companies, archers, even naval crews. It's bloody, chaotic, and you'll probably die in a mud pit outside of Flanders. But hey, you'll get to move around. Maybe earn a few coins. Maybe loot something. Maybe lose a limb. Or maybe you join a guild. If you're in a town or city, you can train under a master craftsman, tailor, tanner, smith, cooper, mason. After years of grueling apprenticeship, you might gain enough skills to earn wages and eventually open your own shop. But guilds are gate-kept, hierarchical, and political. Many require connections, money, or inherited ties. Also, most never reach financial independence. You're still just scraping by, but now with blisters and a permanently smoky beard. Then there are traveling entertainers, jugglers, minstrels, puppeteers. These people roam from town to town, sleeping in barns, dodging theft accusations, and praying not to get mistaken for spies. Being a performer is thrilling, but dangerous, unstable, and often poorly paid. Plus, if the church thinks your act is too racy, you might get stoned. Literally. For women, the options are even narrower. Noble women can manage estates, join convents, or marry. That's it. Peasant women? Work, birth, repeat. The odd midwife, healer, or cunning woman might carve out a local reputation, but that path dances dangerously close to accusations of witchcraft. And let's say you're exceptionally bright. You speak 2 languages. You've memorized the Psalms. You can recite saints' days backwards in your sleep. You're brilliant. Doesn't matter. There are no scholarships. No mentorship programs. No rising star initiatives. If you're not already in the right place, with the right family, at the right moment, you'll be spinning wool beside the fire like your grandmother and her grandmother before her. But, okay, let's go extreme. You run away. You leave your village under the cover of night, pack a crust of bread and a stolen knife, and make your way toward a cathedral town or bustling port. You find work sweeping taverns. Maybe you lie your way into a merchant crew. Maybe you survive a war, take a noble's armor, and become a fake knight. Stories like that do exist, but they're rare. The medieval world does not reward upward movement. It punishes it. And let's not forget, you're illiterate. You don't have maps. You don't know where the roads go. And the next village might not even speak the same dialect. In short, your future isn't a blank page. It's a checklist. Your only real hope? Survive long enough, work hard enough, and maybe, just maybe, your children will have slightly better odds. Maybe they'll apprentice with someone a little richer. Maybe they'll marry up half a social rung. Maybe they'll read. But don't get ahead of yourself. You still have to make it through the rest of your youth. And even if you do, there's something waiting that no medieval person can ever fully avoid. Judgment. From your community. From your priest. From your family. And, eventually, from God. And that's what we're about to face next. You've clawed your way through babyhood, childhood, puberty, pestilence, and public embarrassment. You're a full-blown medieval human now, likely around 15, already weathered like a leather satchel, with the emotional range of a tired goat. And now, just when you thought things might finally ease up, you get hit with the final boss of the Middle Ages. Judgment. Because everything you do, from how you eat to how you sneeze, is being watched. Not just by your neighbors or your family, but by God, the church, the saints, your local priest, and maybe that one goat who always seems to judge you from the shadows. Let's talk religion, because in medieval Europe, it isn't just a Sunday thing. It's the entire operating system of society. It controls how people live, how they think, and, most importantly, how they feel about themselves. From the moment you're born, religion is there. You're baptized as an infant, not because it's cute, but because if you die without it, people think you go to limbo. No heaven. No peace. Just spiritual meh forever. So yeah, pretty high stakes for a one-day-old. By the time you can walk, you're learning prayers. By age 7, you know the Lord's Prayer, the Ave Maria, and how to cross yourself at lightning speed when the church bell rings. And if you mess it up, your neighbor's probably watching, ready to whisper to the priest that you made the sign of the cross with the wrong hand. That kind of slip-up could mark you as possessed, or at least a little suspicious. Every day, you are judged. You eat too much. Gluttony. You talk back. Pride. You cry during chores. Sloth. You steal a turnip because you're starving. That's theft and envy, double sin. There are 7 deadly sins and roughly 5,000 ways to accidentally commit all of them before breakfast. Now, confession is the medieval version of therapy, except it's mandatory, and the advice is usually repent harder. You're supposed to confess regularly, even as a teenager. Did you have impure thoughts about the miller's daughter? Confess it. Did you lie about finishing your chores? Confess. Did you dream about food during Mass? You little heretic. Confess. Then there's penance. If you're caught in a lie, maybe your priest gives you extra prayers. But if you've been really naughty, like skipping church or saying the F word, you might be told to fast for a week. Or walk barefoot to a shrine. Or stand outside during Mass holding a rock and wearing a sack. And yes, that actually happened. The public shaming element of medieval religion is a whole thing. You could be forced to do penance in front of the entire village. Imagine showing up to church and seeing your neighbor Ted standing shirtless in winter holding a candle because he was caught swearing at a donkey. But let's zoom out. Because it's not just you being judged. You're judging everyone else, too. Gossip is a communal sport. People whisper about the woman who never had kids. About the boy who spends too much time alone. About the old man who mumbles to himself and definitely has a demon living in his barn. Superstition runs wild. Bad harvest. Someone sinned. Lightning strike. Someone sinned. Child sick with a fever. Someone in this village definitely sinned and now God is using your baby as an example. So people are constantly trying to stay on God's good side, burning candles, making pilgrimages, donating coins they really can't spare. You wear amulets. Hang herbs over doorways. Whisper prayers over livestock. One bad sneeze and you're clutching your rosary like it's a medieval seatbelt. And let's not forget, the church doesn't just handle sin. It handles everything. Marriage, church sanctioned. Birth, church blessed. Death, church owned real estate. Thank you very much. Want to be buried in sacred ground? Better have your tithes in order. No one wants to end up rotting outside the cemetery wall with the criminals and heretics. That's eternal social exile. Even dead, you don't get to rest easy unless the church says so. And if you're a woman, the judgment doubles. Maybe triples. You're expected to be pious, modest, obedient, silent, fertile, hardworking, and at least mildly enthusiastic about the Virgin Mary. That means no dancing, no laughing too loud, no decorating your hair too flirtatiously, and definitely no talking back to your husband, even if he smells like fermented radish. Break the rules, and suddenly you're not just a sinner, you're dangerous. People might accuse you of witchcraft. That mole on your shoulder could be a demon's teat. That herbal tea you made for your neighbor's cramps. Now you're in front of a village tribunal being asked how often you fly at night. And don't think men are off the hook. If you're lazy, violent, or drink too much, which you probably do, you're a disappointment to your family and a stain on your parish. The local priest might call you out in his sermon. Your neighbors might stop speaking to you. Your wife might accidentally dump cold porridge in your boots. Judgment is everywhere. From the church pulpit. From the market stalls. From your own self. Because medieval Christianity isn't just about punishment, it's about fear. Fear of eternal damnation. Fear of hell, demons, sin, and, most terrifying of all, the Inquisition. That's right. There are literal men in robes who will show up and ask very pointed questions about what you've been reading, saying, or thinking. Have you been consorting with heretics? Reading banned texts? Practicing folk magic? Better not. Or you might be jailed. Or excommunicated. Or burned at the stake. You don't want to be the cautionary tale everyone gossips about for the next decade. But here's the twist: even in all this judgment, people still find comfort in faith. The rituals. The structure. The idea that suffering in this world means reward in the next. It's dark, yes, but it gives meaning to the daily grind. You may be poor, sick, and shamed, but you're not alone. God sees you. Heaven awaits. If you behave. And if you don't, well, there's always purgatory. Or hell. Or worse, being forgotten. And speaking of death, let's say you've somehow managed to avoid everything we've covered so far. There's still one thing left. Because even the luckiest medieval person eventually faces it. The end. And what happens when a baby like you, yes, you, sweet medieval survivor, dies? Let's walk toward the grave. So here we are. The last inevitable chapter in the medieval baby's short, brutal, occasionally lice-infested life. Death. Not a hypothetical. Not an abstract. Just a part of daily life that shows up with the same regularity as bad stew and worse plumbing. And if you're a child in the Middle Ages, death is probably closer than your own shadow. First of all, let's be honest, the odds were never in your favor. Even if you made it past infancy, learned to walk, talk, work, and maybe even get married by your early teens, death is always crouching nearby, waiting for any excuse. A cough. A burn. A bad oyster. A minor scrape that gets infected. You're fragile. And so is everyone else. Child mortality is staggeringly high. In some areas, only 1 in 3 children survives past the age of 5. Most families expect to lose at least one child, if not several. It's not a tragedy. Well, it is, obviously, but it's also a fact of life. You plan for it. You name your children quickly in case they die before baptism. You reuse names if they don't make it. It's not uncommon to find a family with 3 Margarets, 1 living, 2 buried. So what actually happens when you die? Let's start with what people believe. According to church doctrine, the moment you die, your soul is judged. That means heaven, hell, or, for most people, purgatory, which is basically the DMV of the afterlife. It's where you wait, suffer a bit, and burn off your sins until you're squeaky clean enough to move on to paradise. But here's the kicker: if you die unbaptized, especially as an infant, you don't even get that. You go to limbo. Not hell, exactly. More like a no man's land for pure but unredeemed souls. Not painful, but not joyful either. Like spending eternity in a bland waiting room with no snacks. Parents fear this deeply. A stillbirth, a sudden fever before baptism. It's a spiritual crisis, not just a loss. That's why people do emergency baptisms all the time. Midwives are trained to perform them. If a baby looks like it's slipping away, it gets baptized on the spot, even with river water, beer, or spit if needed. Anything to get that soul saved before it floats off into the eternal shrug of limbo. And if you are baptized, then the mourning is a little more bearable. The child goes to heaven, becomes an angel, watches over the family. Still heartbreaking, but with a sense of spiritual closure. Parents console themselves by thinking their child is now with God, safe forever, away from the rats, the rashes, and the rotten soup. The funeral is a modest affair. No embalming, no fancy coffin unless you're rich. The body is washed, often by women in the community, wrapped in a shroud, and buried as soon as possible. If it's winter and the ground's frozen, the burial might be delayed, but not for long. Death waits for no season. If the child came from a poor family, they might be buried in a communal graveyard, unmarked. A simple wooden cross, maybe. If the family is noble, the ceremony is a bit grander. Bells, incense, candles, prayers in Latin none of them really understand. But grief cuts across all classes. The pain of losing a child is the same whether you're a duchess or a dairymaid. And what happens to the living? Grief in the Middle Ages is quieter than ours. There are no therapists, no support groups, no books on coping. You cry, maybe. You pray. You keep going. Because there's bread to bake, hay to stack, more children to raise. Life doesn't stop for sorrow. If you do stop, you might be next. But people do honor their lost children. They name the next baby after the one they lost. They light candles. They make small offerings. Sometimes they report dreams, visions of their child as a cherub, smiling from heaven. These dreams are whispered between women like secrets, comforting, fragile things. Maybe you lost your baby. But maybe, just maybe, they're still watching you. Still loving you. Still part of your family, just beyond the veil. And then, eventually, you join them. Because let's be real, even if you beat the odds, lived to adulthood, built a hut, married twice, had 6 kids, only 3 survived, and worked your bones into dust, you're still going to die in the Middle Ages. Maybe it's a bad winter. Maybe it's a tooth gone septic. Maybe it's another plague, or just the sheer weight of years and wood smoke and too much salt pork. The medieval world doesn't fear death the way we do. It expects it. Children are told from a young age that life is suffering, death is constant, and paradise comes after. That's the reward. That's the light at the end of the murky, manure-stained tunnel. But let's not end on a total downer. Because in spite of all this, death, disease, endless judgment, people still hope. Even medieval peasants carved angels into their walls. They sang lullabies. They wrote prayers asking for protection, for comfort, for health. They told stories by firelight and believed in miracles. They loved their children fiercely, even if those children only lived a few seasons. So yes, if you were a baby in the Middle Ages, you probably wouldn't survive. But if you did, you'd be part of a long line of people who endured the darkest centuries with calloused hands, aching backs, and a strange, stubborn kind of joy. And now, it's time to gently lay this journey to rest. The final chapter begins. So, miraculously, impossibly, you've made it to the end. You were born into a world that didn't expect you to survive, and yet here you are, scarred, hunched, missing a few teeth, but alive. Maybe you're 35. Maybe 50. Either way, you're practically a unicorn. A walking miracle. A grizzled veteran of medieval life. Now what? Well, now you die. But don't worry. This one's not sudden. No bloodletting, no mystery rash, no suspicious meat pie. This is the slow kind, the long fade, the shuffle toward the inevitable. Your joints ache. Your breath is short. The harvest feels heavier this year. You sit more than you used to. You forget small things. And everyone around you knows what's coming. Death in the Middle Ages isn't a surprise party. It's more like a friend who's been lurking in the corner of every tavern, every field, every back room since you were born. Your final days are spent in preparation, not of the body, but the soul. Because in this world, dying isn't just a biological shutdown, it's a spiritual event. A high-stakes exam you've spent your whole life studying for. First, you summon the priest. Or someone else does, if you're too weak to move. He arrives with his little kit, the holy oils, the bread, the wine. Last rites. You confess every sin you can remember, every lie, every stolen egg, every bad thought about the neighbor's goat. Then he anoints your forehead, your lips, your hands. He says the prayers. You're now officially on the conveyor belt to the afterlife. Then comes the deathbed vigil. If you're lucky, you're not alone. Maybe a child is there, or a friend, or a kind neighbor. They light candles. They read psalms. They speak softly. They hold your hand, even if it's more bone than flesh. If you're noble, it's more ceremonial. If you're poor, it's more honest. And then, at last, you let go. Medieval people often describe death in tactile terms. A loosening, a slipping, a final breath that leaves the lips like a bird escaping a cage. Your eyes close. Your chest stills. And just like that, you're gone. Or, not quite. Because what happens after is just as important. Your body is washed, respectfully. Unless it's plague season, in which case it's tossed into the ground as fast as possible, often without ceremony. But let's assume this is a peaceful passing. You're wrapped in linen, laid on a board, perhaps with coins over your eyes or herbs tucked into your hands. People file past your home to pay respects. They murmur prayers, make the sign of the cross, say things like, "He was a good man," even if you weren't always. Then comes the funeral. Not everyone gets one. But if you do, it's a quiet affair, simple and heavy with incense. The priest leads a procession. Maybe a bell tolls. You're lowered into the earth with a prayer, facing east, because that's the direction Christ is expected to return from. Just in case you need to stand up and meet him. Afterwards, your family might share a meal, usually lentils or bread, nothing fancy. They tell stories. They cry, a little. They return home to continue surviving, just as you did before them. But here's the strange part, even though you're gone, you're still part of the world. You're remembered in the Book of Souls. People pray for you on All Souls Day. Your name is spoken during Mass. If you were loved, maybe someone lights a candle for you once a year. If you were disliked, well, at least no one defiles your grave. Hopefully. And your soul? Well, if all went to plan, if you were baptized, confessed, received the sacraments, and kept your sins manageable, you're on your way to paradise. First, a detour through purgatory, sure. It's smoky and unpleasant. But eventually, heaven. Golden light. Angels with lutes. Endless bread with no weevils. That's what you're told, anyway. That's what everyone hopes. But here's what we know for sure. Your life, as brief and brutal as it was, mattered. Not in the grand history book way. No statues, no chronicles, no epics. But in the small things. The meals you cooked. The stories you passed on. The people you comforted. The work you did that kept someone else warm, fed, or alive just a little longer. You were one thread in a vast, filthy, beautiful medieval tapestry, and without you, it would have unraveled just a little sooner. And now, let's bring this all to rest. Because even a medieval life deserves a gentle ending. So, now you can rest. The clanging bells fade into silence. The smoky candles burn down to soft orange embers. Outside, the fields lie still, the sheep curled into themselves, the wind brushing past the crumbling stone walls like a lullaby. You made it, little medieval traveler. Against all odds. Through pain and poverty and cold dirt floors. Through superstition and sickness and the relentless ticking of a life lived too fast, too young, too hard. You carried buckets, buried brothers, dodged death more times than anyone should. And still, somehow, you laughed. You danced when the fiddler came through town. You watched the stars and believed in heaven. You whispered prayers into the wind. You held tiny joys like treasures, because you knew how rare they were. And now, all that's left is quiet. No more sickness. No more rules. No more judgment. Just the soft hush of earth above and roots below. Maybe someone plants a flower over your grave. Maybe not. But the soil remembers you. The stones remember you. The world carries the imprint of your small, stubborn existence. Let that be enough. So drift now. Gently. Back through time. Back through sleep. Let your breath slow, your muscles loosen, your heart release all its worries. There are no lords here. No hunger. No plague. Just stillness. Just peace. You don't have to survive anymore. You just get to rest. Good night.